Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for being here today. I'm Melissa Sadorf, the Executive Director of the National Rural Education Association, and NREA exists to champion rural schools and the communities that they serve. And one of the ways that we do that is by making sure that rural leaders have access to the kind of professional learning that is actually designed for them, not adopted from somewhere else, but really truly built for rural. And that's exactly what this series is. So today is kicking off Lead Where You Are, a three-part webinar series developed in partnership with SchoolSims, who is one of our strategic partners. Each session is going to be focused on one of the most pressing challenges that rural district leaders face, whether it's building the right team with limited resources and a limited margin for error. And today we're going to be starting where it all begins, which is hiring. I want to take a moment to introduce our strategic partner, which is SchoolSims. SchoolSims was founded by Ken Spiro with a simple and powerful belief that experience is the best teacher. SchoolSims uses simulation-based learning to put leaders in realistic, high-stakes scenarios so that they can practice their decision-making before those decisions have real consequences. It is one of the most innovative approaches to leadership development in education today that I've found, and I am proud to have SchoolSims as an NREA partner. So Ken, welcome, and thank you for bringing this to our members. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Melissa. And it's delighted to be here and pleasure to see you all and to be working with you. Again, as Melissa said, we do simulations. And again, our premise is that experience is the best teacher. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you all that many of the things that you face that cause you the most heartburn, if you will, are the kinds of things that are contextual by nature, which means that these are things where the answer to the question of what's the right thing to do is always it depends. And that is dependent on our ability to exercise good judgment and to evaluate the inherent trade-offs that exist, right? The positives and the negatives. And so as we think about our hiring leadership, bringing on leadership, working with ongoing leadership, because every day is filled with unprecedented things, because every day is new. Every day the challenges manifest just a little differently. Um, or working with our staff and helping them to develop, being able to provide experience, which is what is required in order to create better judgment, right? We can teach you about issues, but to get you better at using them in context requires experience. And of course, the School of Hard Knocks is rather painful. So these simulations are designed to be both scalable, they're browser-based, and you'll experience one as part of this, um, and engaging and developmental. So you can reach your staff where they are. And so this is an opportunity to have to engage with, if you will, this kind of work. And the next slide, Trent. One of the key things about this is that just as you wouldn't put a pilot in a plane or a doctor or nurse into a patient suite without hours of sim, right? The last thing you'd want to hear when you're traveling is the pilot gets on the mic and says, "Hey, folks, glad to have you with us today. Today's my first day, too. My first day in the cockpit. Let's have some fun together," right? You wouldn't want to have that. Why do we expect the same kind of thing with our in teachers or even leaders in terms of having them take over things responsible for our children, responsible for the building, build with children, relationships with parents, community, etc. So the opportunity to engage in authentic experiences is obviously something that can be very developmental and also has a lot of other benefits, which we'll get to. I don't want to take too much time, but just to give you a sense of what the opportunity is. And one of the key things that we focus on is although experience is the best teacher, we believe that, but there is also instruction, right? There is also how we learn from being taught. There's things we don't know, and we need that too. And the most powerful way to learn then is combining both. And so what we wanted to do today is to share an example of what that can look like, where we talk about an area that is of need and that requires some insight into maybe some new ways of doing things like hiring, and then have the opportunity to see how that blends with the simulation experience to say, okay, now let's get into some of the areas where there's nuance, where there's additional nuance, and to combine the two to demonstrate both the opportunity to learn and also the opportunity to apply. So, with that, we have Trent Grunmeyer with us today, who's currently a professor at Buena Vista University in Iowa. Um, he is as a former superintendent. Now he teaches. He also has his own search firm, and he has lots to share in terms of this area and many others. And I will turn it over to Trent and leave you to him.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Appreciate the opportunity today. Hopefully, everybody can see and hear okay, and very excited that you took a little bit of time because I know the emails don't stop when you jump on a webinar like this. So appreciate you taking time, and we'll do my part to make sure that our content today is super meaningful. As Ken mentioned, I wear a couple different hats, and so I want to give you a context today and what I'm offering you. First of all, I do teach at the university, and I taught at a previous university at Drake University, where I actually started with the simulations. I've actually published a couple, 2 or 3 articles, peer-reviewed articles on using the simulations to train and support school principals and aspiring administrators. So I have that lens. And then we have at least 2 simulations through SchoolSims built into every one of our courses in our program at Buena Vista University now. And I will tell you the course evaluation feedback, if you're on here from higher education, has been super positive from students. It is, like Ken alluded to, some of the most realistic things that really make a textbook come alive and their internships come alive and truly prepare students for the challenges that they face in the field. So that's the university angle and some of the research behind what I'm going to share today. More practically, I will also tell you that I lead a search firm in a couple different states, and we actually use some simulations. The one I'm going to share today is one I actually worked with Ken and co-wrote and co-recorded on bias in hiring. And that was because, maybe some of you have experienced this. Today is a board perspective where you're walking a board through a hiring process, and there's evidence of bias about a principal candidate. I actually wrote that because I wanted to use it with school boards to try to minimize bias in hiring. And so hopefully you see the benefit today as an example of that simulation. And obviously SchoolSims is a great partner. Ken may or may not share this, but they're constantly creating new sims and just staying in touch with the market. So I just want to give you that context as we get started and spend some time together today. And these are the different states that my search firm supports. Before we begin the simulation piece of today, I think this will be a nice path because I'm going to start, Melissa agreed, that talking about AI in the recruitment process, especially in small rural schools, is a challenge. I acknowledge that. I help a lot of districts with that. I leverage AI every day in different capacities, and I want to share with you, hopefully, a couple practical opportunities to leverage AI for recruiting and screening candidates today as we get started. And then naturally, as we start to get into the hiring process, we're going to pivot into the bias in hiring sim today that I think will be a nice segue into the hiring practice, as Ken alluded to. So again, I know a lot of you, recruiting quality teachers and administrators is getting harder and harder and harder. So I challenge you today just to take away 1 or 2 things that I can share with you. We will not have time to probably become experts in some of these tools or applications today, but I promise you that if you reach out to me after today or Melissa wants to continue this conversation, I'm here to support you and learning more about some of the tools and the AI ideas I share with you today. If you think about SWOT analysis when it comes to the hiring landscape for rural educators, and again, I'm going to focus on administrators today, but you could probably put paraprofessionals, teachers, administrators, any title out there, quite honestly, because they're all a challenge. It's just harder. People are more choosy post-COVID about where they go. Salary and benefits is not always a good recruiting method anymore. it's just a real challenge. And so I think districts have to get really creative about getting their opportunities out there, sharing what their district offers that might be unique, and also not just recruiting new people, but retaining the good folks that you have. So let's just acknowledge there's a ton of AI tools out there right now, and I don't know about you, but part of the challenge for me is to stay on top of what's new. What can save me significant time or do something better than I can do? And the two that I'm most comfortable with right now and that I'm going to showcase today is Google Gemini, which is obviously a Google tool or their version of AI, and ChatGPT. And I will tell you, I most often work with the paid version of ChatGPT just to protect the names and some of the data behind that tool. Now, as we talk about AI, I know some of you right now are thinking, I don't use this, that you might be all over the board on your use. Some of you might be super users beyond me. I want to acknowledge, I guess, my mindset when it comes to AI. And it's grounded in this decision education foundation that I really have bought into. And I actually teach our students as well. AI has great power to do things faster and perhaps more objectively than we can as a human being. However, we have some creativity, some negotiation power, and the application piece that I think is still a human piece of any type of delivery. And so let me just acknowledge that in this Decision Education Foundation, I believe AI makes good sense to start with the human piece, the head, and meaning, what are you asking AI to do, and get really focused and intentional on this. That often comes down to the right prompt or feeding the AI tool, whatever you pick, the right data. And that's critical. And AI can't do that for you. It can help you frame a prompt or give you ideas, but that takes some cognition to think about, what am I actually trying to get done? Or am I just playing with AI, really? Okay. Then let AI do its work. Be more efficient, be more objective, perhaps be more thorough. And that's the time-saving piece. And then I think there has to be a human context at the end. What is the actual application? Now I get to decide, what am I going to apply or share? Or was this better than I would have come up on my own? And it doesn't mean it has to be the whole, it doesn't mean you're stealing all of the AI. Maybe it's a sentence, maybe it's an idea, but I still think that human connection at the beginning and the human connection after you use AI is critical. And I don't know if you share my belief or not, but I just want to share that before we get started with some of these tools. When we go through the marketing process, this is a slide I actually share with school boards and hiring teams. There's a lot that goes into a search process to do it right and to do it well, right? Figuring out what do you need, and before you even maybe go start recruiting. I'm going to focus today on more of the advertising, recruiting, and then screening. And then, like I said, we'll finish with the bias and hiring. So let's get to some practical ideas, Trent. I'm using my lunch break or whatever today. Let's get to it. All right, let me try to deliver here. First of all, if you see on the left, this is an actual job posting that we create. And most of the content on this posting and some of the images were AI produced. Where did they come from? Information off that district, South Tama, off their website. So we maybe took a whole page of content from their website about district information and condensed it down to a page about what candidates need to know. Then we took this job posting as a PDF, we put it in Gemini or ChatGPT, and we said, take this job posting and create a marketing email, including the application deadline. And this is literally a screenshot on the right of now an email that took me 20 seconds. And now I can use that to send out to candidates that, by the way, were good candidates for a different job that I wanted to try to recruit for this job. Same content. I perused it to make sure it's accurate, and you can do the same. Salary range, application deadline, right? I want it to be the tone. I'm using that human piece again on this. But it literally took me a minute to create another document that I could mark it with. Okay. Let's take this a step further. I have the job posting again, same posting with the key information that we always share. And I used a different prompt. I said, take this job posting and create a social media image. Create a social media image and highlight the application deadline. So I wanted two different things. It was two different prompts. And you can see, using their logo and everything, this created a nice social media post for me. And then I actually put the application link in the body of X or in the body of LinkedIn. But that's better than I was going to create on my own, I can tell you that. And then over here on the right, you can see we created another one that I put out 2 weeks later during the application deadline. Hey, don't forget the deadline's coming up, apply now, put it out there. I put the link in the content of the post. Pretty simple, took me 30 seconds. Let's go a little further. So I use that stuff for recruiting, okay? Just a couple simple ideas up front. Now let's fast forward and say we have 20 applicants. Hopefully, that'd be a great problem, right? Now I got to sort through those 20 applicants and a lot of information. And I respect how busy everybody is on the call because you're probably running a school, running a building, maybe coaching a sport, and if maybe even driving a bus, who knows, in a lot of our settings now. But you're doing a lot of things. And so we have started to use, we will take a candidate's cover letter, resume, and recommendation letters, and we will put in a prompt that is right here on this one that says, based on the provided resume, create a set of interview questions based on the candidate's experience, achievement, and leadership philosophy. So we actually have the chat tool start to identify interview questions and pull out differences between candidates based on their applications. This works best in Google Gemini because once you have them in a folder, if you have all the candidates in a Google folder, then it's protected and you can pull it all right from Gemini rather than having to put them in, again, ChatGPT, quite honestly. So we're starting to use it for interview questions there. And I'll tell you, I don't use all the interview questions, but the ones that I can generalize and ask the same finalists that maybe dig a little deeper because of their materials, those are the questions that tend to make it to the final list. Okay. Now over here on the left, let me explain this one. This is a screenshot of what we pulled together for school boards on finalists. This is just a mock candidate, John Smith. But notice at the top, it says leadership experience. That was pulled from their application and resume. And then we pulled out some highlighted bullets. And then we checked licensure. And then we have a summary of their references here. The prompt that we gave this was, based on the attached resume and application, please create a bulleted summary of the candidate's current job, leadership experience, career highlights, licensure, and list 2 positive recommendations and any concerns. I mean, it was a wide one. And it literally came up with this. We put it in the boxes or formatted it like this. And then we actually take that to school boards to start to narrow down, again, a pool of 20, maybe to those 5 or 6 that are going to be screened in the next phase. Okay. Human touch, put in the right prompt, let AI do the objective sorting and screening, and then come back and say, how are we going to use this information? And I still do a lot of fact checking. So notice on here, I would still go through this and check things. Is the experience lining up? Yep. Okay, I feel good. Are these direct quotes from references? Yep. Okay, that's the human touch that I'm going to make sure what I'm presenting to a hiring team is accurate. Okay. In the end, if I'm going to use it for interview questions, I'm still the one meeting with that hiring team. I better make sure they're the questions that that team may want. This is another tool about interview questions. I would just make the point here that if you notice right below this set of interview question, there's a parenthesis here, and it says, is approachable, accessible, and welcoming. So I have a tool on our website right up here on the corner. It's a free tool. So I'm not selling anything today, but if you went to brunmeyerleadersearch.com, you'd see on the bottom of the homepage, you can take desired qualifications once you know it. Maybe you're looking for a principal that is like that, approachable and welcoming. The second bullet here has a strong understanding of building finance. The next one said demonstrates a collaborative leadership style. So you can go into this chat feature on my website and say, based on these qualifications and wanting somebody approachable, understands building budget finance, and it has a collaborative leadership style, draft 5 questions, draft 10 questions to help vet final principal candidate interviews. See what it kicks back. By the way, it's pulling from 128 of my documents and previous interviews. And then you can decide which questions you want to use, but it will save you significant time. And then lastly, in the middle here, fast forward, we go through the interview process perhaps. Maybe you have interview teams weighing in or providing feedback. We use a Google survey or a Google form. At the end, I actually go scrub all the feedback on a particular candidate. And then for the hiring team, I pull together summaries. So on candidate 1, I would summarize in bullets both positives and concerns that came from the interview team. So everything is on one page comparing applicants. Okay. So I'm going to just back up here a minute before we get in the simulation. Melissa, if you could help me and see if there's any questions in the chat. I know we don't have
far.
Okay, I know we don't have a ton of time today, but hopefully some of the applications, we are actually doing this stuff. We're actually using it. What I'm sharing with you today is kind of, I think, some of the best use of AI. Like I said, mostly Gemini and ChatGPT. And I hope you hear clearly. We're not just using AI to just save time. We're using AI to try to be as objective as possible, be efficient, yes, and also deliver for the hiring teams that we serve, both in recruiting, screening, and drafting interview questions. And if we have more time at the end, I'm happy to actually get in and demo some of these applications. Any burning questions before we get into the bias in hiring simulation?
I'm hearing none.
Okay, we'll move right along. And I think you'll enjoy this simulation because it's very realistic, but I want to ground you real quick. We're going to be in the context of this sim, and I'll put it on the screen and walk you through it, but I'm just going to warn you, I am going to ask for a little audience participation here by either chiming in verbally, putting something in the chat, and I think Melissa even had a poll that we can use as well. So I want your engagement, because if you're using this with your administrative team or a teacher group or your board, or you're teaching at a university and want to use it with students, I want to be able to model for you today some different ways that you can truly engage people with the Sims. Okay. So as we get started, here's the role we're going to play. Okay, we're going to be the role of a superintendent at this Gunderson Community School District. That's a mock school district. It's 3,500 students, 500 staff members. You can see it has multiple schools there, 1 high school, 1 middle school, and 4 elementary buildings. So probably a little larger than many of your systems here, but that's the context of the sim. And because you're the new superintendent coming in, the board wants more of a voice in the new high school principal. Pivotal public role in the district. The board says we want to be more involved because you don't have the relationships and blah, 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 blah. So I want to give you that context, and then I'm going to pivot, and we're actually going to go to the simulation that I have queued up here. This reminds me of the old choose your adventure when I was a kid, right? If you want to go this way, go to that page. And if you want the character to die, go to that page. I don't know. But ready or not, here we go. Melissa, can you see my screen okay?
Yep, I sure can.
Okay, and I'm going to make sure I have the sound shared properly, so we're good there. All right, ready or not, here we go. Just making sure my volume's up here. As we move through the simulation, notice I have next up in the corner here, you'll work with your school board and constituents to make the best decision for the district. You're going to be challenged to act with integrity and fairness while promoting equity and professional norms. As you move forward with this, your choices are going to be recorded. There is a report that's produced at the end. I make my students turn that in. And here's the bad part, good or bad, we don't get to go backwards. So there's no going back in this choose your adventure and starting over. You can replay it, but down the road. So just letting you know up front. Already kind of set the stage on this, but this is a suburban district. Currently 80% demographics are white, but they're projected to be less than 60% white in the next 5 years. So demographics are changing. Although the shift has not been directly addressed to the board, you're sensing some growing tension. Some board members seem to have difficulty embracing the growing diversity in the school and community. Again, we're going to play the role of the new superintendent. And I think all of this we already talked about because candidates could be applying for multiple jobs later in the spring here. You hope to be able to offer the candidate, the successful candidate, pretty soon or immediately after these interviews because you don't want to lose them to a neighboring district. And boy, is that real. In the interview process, 4 candidates, you have 4 candidates for the high school principal position. All are external to the district. So maybe the good thing here is that we don't have any internal candidates. Throughout the interview process, you used 3 interview teams, student, staff, and community. Maybe that's similar to how you do it in your district. And following the interviews, you met with each of those teams to review and compile their general feedback about the candidates. Normally, the decision to hire the high school principal is the superintendent's. However, again, you're only 6 months into the contract, and the board wants to be part of the hiring process. Time for the board meeting. I got to figure out why this picture is not up. Let me do a quick refresh here because there should be a video popping up here for me.
Welcome to the Bias in the Hiring Process simulation. Click the next. It's time for this month's board meeting. Let's observe as the meeting gets underway.
Okay, hey everybody, let's sit down. Let's get this meeting started. It's 6:02. By my watch, I'll get the meeting called to order. Let's do roll call. Maxwell, I'm here. Vendor. Here. Goodson.
Here.
Stockwell. Here. Pearson.
Here.
All right. The superintendent has also joined us for this meeting. Do I have a motion for this one agenda item?
I'll make a motion to enter into a closed session to review the hiring or appointment of personnel.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're in closed session. Now, you take it from here.
Love that. Stares right at you like, okay, this is getting serious now. But a typical board member, and now turning it over to the superintendent.
You want to engage the board in discussion regarding the 4 candidates that have been interviewed. Which of the following will you do? Select all that apply. Politely explain or reiterate the importance of the decision. You need each member of the board to engage and give this their best effort. Review the process that was used to this point. The background information will provide them context for their discussion. Provide an overview of the data derived from the various interview teams. Input from the various interviewing groups will help expand their perspective. Provide detailed data about each candidate. This detail will potentially preempt questions and streamline the process. Provide them with community survey results. The community survey data should provide meaningful context for their discussion.
Perfect. I forget sometimes that we have narration on this one and I get talking and don't give her a chance to walk through it for us. So these are our options. The good news in this particular choice is that now that the board has turned it over to us to start this discussion, we can pick more than one thing, and some things would be simultaneous here, right? Or they may have ahead of time. But I'm going to pause here and ask for some audience participation here. If you're the superintendent, new superintendent in this district, and the board, wants to engage and start this discussion about the candidates after they've been interviewed, where would you recommend starting based on the options provided? Melissa, if you see somebody that's willing to speak up here, please help me out.
Well, I know that we have people that are previous superintendents. Steve, Stuart, Chris, if any of you want to come off mute, that'd be helpful. They're being shy today. So is there anyone else?
I'm not shy.
I was going to say.
Yeah, first of all, if I had 4 candidates, I'd flip.
That's good. You do today. You do today.
And typically I would have each one of the board members would have a score sheet.
Sure.
So that would probably be the first thing that I would do is I would go down in some type of order and ask them if they would sum up their score sheet of some sort. Where did they put them and why?
Yep.
We're in closed session here, which is illegal in the state of North Dakota. But in this particular case, I'd ask them in closed session, where did they score each candidate and why?
That's great. That's a great start. Get their feedback right up front. I see in the chat here too. John mentioned, thank you, John. I'd probably do all of them, but I would start with the selection process if it hadn't been engaged in prior, which is great. I will tell you when I present this as well, some superintendents will kind of reiterate, how big of a decision or what criteria we're after, just to kind of ground it and say, hey, remember, we need a leader that's this, this, and this, right? Approachable, collaborative, and whatever. So, but I think, Stephen, I heard you talk about maybe give them a chance to provide their feedback on each candidate.
Yeah,
well, Trent, if I can add, go ahead, Steve.
I always worked for the board, so I wanted to make sure that their opinions are known. So, but at the same time, I agree. There was reasons there were things that we were looking for based on our survey. And those things, we usually had points that we put together and a grade sheet. So why did they grade them? What was it? What was their reasoning behind that? What was their rationale?
And this is the point where you hope for consensus, right?
I was hoping for, yes.
Yeah. Stuart.
And if there was somebody, hey, they're on a board, what were their reasonings?
Yeah. Well, I would tell them to back off and leave me alone. It's my decision. No, I would actually start with politely explain, because they need to know the importance of the decision without making their own biases so evident in the selection process, that this is a decision of 5 people, 7 people, and if you're very unfortunate, only 3 people sitting on your board. But I think the politely explaining is the very way to start that. And then I'm assuming at this point they have all been given kind of a review packet that they can review, and then the discussion would take place.
Certainly could. Yeah, that context might be how you do it in your district. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's good. And guys, we've already started a discussion about, how do you do it? How do you do it? Right. And so when I'm teaching this, or we're talking about it, or I'm using this with the board, it really forces them to get serious about how do we want to do it? And what are the best practices, right? What's the pros and cons to doing it that way? Because I will tell you, as a search firm consultant trying to get a board wrangled, I've hired 2 superintendents in the last week already. I don't start the conversation with the board until I have this. I want them to see all the data from the interview teams before they weigh in personally, because they handpick people on interview teams. Now, that's more for a superintendent than a principal, but yeah, I can temper a board. They may have their own opinion, but when they handpick interview teams, I actually start with that one. So let's pick these 3 and just keep this going, because Ken would tell me he wants me to get through most of this simulation. Let's rock and roll.
So we're here to make a recommendation to the superintendent on the new hire for the high school principal. Let's talk about those candidates. I don't like Hanson or Kramer, and I'm not sure the community is ready for the other two, so I recommend we start over.
Now, that's not fair to the remaining candidates. They came in and interviewed too. I don't disagree with the two you want to throw out, but the other two interviewed just as well and are highly qualified. And is this community so set in its ways that they won't accept a leader of color or a confident woman? I think the rest of you should weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what everybody's saying. Definitely think we just need to kind of slow down, not start over from scratch, go through our candidates that we currently have.
Okay, love this because it gets real here, and this is where you're starting to hear a little bit of the bias.
So we're here to make a recommendation to the.
I want to pause here because over on the left, if I don't share this with you, you won't know since I'm running this, but over on the left here, we have a file cabinet right here. So notice they just started talking about some candidates, right? So I'm going to open this file cabinet. I don't know, PDF exists there. Here it is. Sorry, the PDF will be coming later with the data. But these are the actual candidates because they're characters in this. So they're going to start talking about these candidates. You can see this is Mr. Hanson, a little bit of his resume summarized here. I'll just tussle through this because of time. You can see another candidate, this is Mr. Andrew Taylor, African American, many articles. Board members expressed he wasn't a good fit. Mr. Craig Kramer, working on his PhD. And Mrs. Lisa Carter. And that, again, that's information we have up here now, just we can go back and forth on that. So I'll come back to that. I know I didn't give you a lot of time to read that, but I will come back to that because we may need to learn a little bit more on these candidates.
You recognize, right out of the chute, that the board is off to a rough start. How will you respond? Select all that apply. Intervene and focus on qualifications? You need to help them avoid getting sidetracked. Allow the conversation to continue? As a facilitator, you need to be careful not to obstruct meaningful conversation and debate. Agree that the community concerns are real. Above all, you need to be aware of and respond to the needs of the community. Remind them that students are stakeholders. While community concerns are real, overlooking a qualified candidate is a disservice to the kids. Remind them that support of diversity is important. Your role here is to keep them focused on and moving towards the standards.
Okay, so you saw the start of the board there. People chiming in already about either start the process over or no, we need to give these candidates a shot. We got to know the candidates just a little better. How would you respond this if the board gets off to this rougher start to keep them focused? And some of you that have great experience can certainly chime in on this as well. How would you respond?
I'll kick off. Being in a rural area, I would not allow the conversation to continue because you don't want the board members to become combative towards each other. And I think you keep the main thing where qualifications, well, no, I would go back to what's in the best interest of the students. What have we agreed upon? And you keep it objective and not subjective. But if you don't intervene and the temperature rises, that's not going to be good. So I wouldn't let the conversation continue. You have to redirect them back to what you agree upon before you start it objectively.
Well said, sir. Keep grounding them on what they're looking for. Make it objective and keep the focus on students. Thank you for kicking that off. Other thoughts on this one? Well, let's see where that takes us.
You feel the need to have the board take a step back. Which of the following will you do now? Intervene? You need to influence the direction this discussion is taking. Don't intervene. You need to allow this discussion to continue without getting in the way.
Let's just do this is an interesting one, especially when I'm teaching aspiring superintendents, because this is usually split, right? Steve, before you just said, or maybe it wasn't Steve, somebody said that, they're my boss, so you got to hear them out. Somebody else will say, I'm the superintendent. I'm 6 months in my contract. This is my hire. So this seems like maybe it's a no-brainer, but the truth is this one actually precipitates an interesting discussion. So don't give me the middle finger, but maybe a 1 to intervene, and 2, don't intervene at this point and let the board discuss more. 1 or 2. I see some 1s. Looking at my screen here, mostly 1s.
I got to get my 1 so you can see it. There we go.
It's a tech trick here. Okay, we'll go with intervene here. See where that takes us on our adventure here.
You've chosen to intervene. Which of the following will you do now? Show benefits to kids. Reiterate that we need a collaborative decision.
Okay, so Chris said before, bring it back to students, make this a student center. What's best for kids, which would be option 1 again, or reiterate that we need maybe a unified decision because that's important for the next high school principal. Again, 1 or 2. 1, 1, 1. 1s are prevailing again. I haven't got the bird again, so we're doing good. Benefits kids. Let's move forward.
I think a woman leading our high school is just what this community needs. It'll be a great role model for our daughters.
Are you kidding me? I disagree. I think we should just start over.
I mean, we haven't even vetted the remaining candidates yet. I think starting over the process is way too premature.
Okay, so this sim is actually called bias in hiring. Starting to get a glimpse from the board members where there's probably some biases starting to float in here, and that is the intent of this simulation.
In an effort to refocus the board and assist them in recognizing a possible unspoken agenda, you decide to intervene with a quick overview of bias. Bias is defined as learned attitudes or stereotypes that exist in our subconscious and can involuntarily affect the way we think and act. Here are some common forms of bias.
There you go. So at this point, the question here, a little audience participation again, is so far in this simulation, what kind of bias have you seen trickle in? I will start with the obvious one. One of them said, are we not ready for a female candidate yet?
Yeah.
We have gender bias. What else?
I don't know what kind of bias it would be, but there was one of the board members wanted to scrap the process and had gone on so far and start all over again, which would be a problem.
Right. We'll just say start over, even though that's probably not a bias in itself. But that.
So Trent, why did you see it necessary to even describe them by race?
Say that one more time.
Why did you see it necessary to even describe them by race?
In their bios up here?
Yes.
Well, Steve, it's just a simulation, and
I know.
But the truth is that in any hiring process now, if people have cover letters and resumes, they're probably going to go do their own creeping or check on social media and some of that stuff.
Yeah, you're going to go to Facebook. You're going to go to LinkedIn. You're going to go to board minutes from previous jobs. I understand. TikTok, Snapchat, they got a digital footprint that goes back to 8th grade.
Right. Just trying to make it as realistic as possible. Have we seen any age discrimination here or ethnicity or anything like that, would you say?
I would say right now it hasn't actually been released.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start there and then we'll keep it going just so we can try to get through the sim here. Maybe she's not going to talk to me this time. You asked the group to define precisely what that means by not ready yet to make a decision. There are sideways glances and perplexity, but no one speaks out. So after a few long moments of silence, you draw a clear line back to state standards by reminding them that despite the challenges introducing diversity into a homogeneous community, our focus must remain on identifying the most qualified candidate and then finding ways to help them be successful. As the discussion, sorry about this, there should be audio here, but notice my picture is going away for some odd reason.
There you go.
Welcome to the You want to engage the board in discussion regarding the 4 candidates that have been interviewed. Which of You recognize, right out of the chute, that the board is on. You feel the need to have the board take a. You've chosen to intervene. Which of the
I think
Sorry, I'm just getting us back to where we were because my audios were going away. Here's where we are. Still no picture. As the discussion continues and tensions escalate, you note that Pearson and Maxwell, two of the board members, are at odds, and Van de Vender is inserting himself into a referee position. Since you have yet to intervene at this point, Goodson and Stockwell are drawn into the conversation since the board members are giving them looks and wanting them to take a side. Need like a drum roll here.
I don't want to fight about this. I think any of the candidates will work. Can't we just select one and move forward?
As long as it's not Kramer. I don't like his ethics. I'm concerned about what people are saying.
Yeah, Irene is right. Let's dump Kramer and let's pick one of the others.
All right, so maybe one candidate, Kramer's are going to be off the list here. After some discussion and diverging opinions, you decide it might be best to break the gridlock by making a recommendation since you are the superintendent. So after hearing the board's input so far, it's going to push you to maybe make a recommendation. Remember, they just took this Craig Kramer off, right? They kind of agreed to take this one off. So our decision is really around this David Hansen, Andrew Taylor, and Lisa Carter. So I will pop this back up, peruse through this a little bit, give you a chance just to see a little bit more about these candidates, and then I'm going to ask for who you think, if you were the superintendent, you'd make a recommendation for. Student interviews provided overwhelming support. Board members thought he was arrogant. Taylor. Strong instructional leaders by teachers and high marks for collaboration. Student interviews provided overwhelming support. Board members expressed concern he wasn't a good fit for the district. Kramer's off. And then Lisa Carter. Student interviewers provided overwhelming support and stated she was the nicest one we saw today. Board members expressed concern that she wasn't a good fit for the community. So if you have to make a recommendation with that information, and I don't know if you can help me with this, but if we did a poll here, it would be 1, 2, or let's call that 4, 1, 2, or 4. Let me see if I can pop up a poll, or maybe you have to help me with that, Melissa.
You want to just do the same?
Sure, we can do it the easy way here.
Or there's in the chat as well. We have 1 and 4.
Okay, 1 would be Hansen, 4 would be Carter. Give us your feedback either with a finger here or in the chat. See what we recommend.
I want something done.
You have 2 2s, a 4 from Stewart, We have 2 2s, 2 4s, and a 1. Anyone else want to weigh in?
I'm not voting because I don't know how these guys are going to work with my team yet. I have no idea.
Putting through personality inventory next.
That's
Well,
right.
Trent, the next thing I would add would be, oh, go ahead. The next thing I would add is I would just do a power poll right there before we even get to it and say, where are we at? I mean, is there anybody, let's rank everybody one before we even eliminate the one. Let's power rank 1, 2, 3, and 4 and see how close we are to begin with and this conversation.
Yeah, because you might be surprised either way, right? You might be all over the board, or there might be uniformity right up front.
Well, there could be everybody agrees on the number 2 candidate too.
Right.
Yeah.
So
They could do the Trent, they could do the Shy Lutheran one where they put it on a piece of paper and they don't even put their name on it. They just turn it in and rank them.
Right.
yeah.
Right. Now, here's where the power of this is. I know some of you have smaller teams, but these decisions are important with the board or with the hiring team. But think about what we just talked about. Before you get there and you're in a board meeting or you're with the hiring team where you're kind of divided like this, do we have a plan? Because when I'm training my team of consultants and stuff, it's like we're in some tough board members. I worked a search in Missouri this year where we had board members that had a lawsuit against each other. Right? And the true story. So how do you get consensus, like you said, Stuart, and maybe a safer way to try to get uniformity? Because the other challenge is if I call one of these candidates and I say, hey, listen, I don't have full board support for you, and they were involved, are they going to take it? Which is a whole other concern, right? So getting your team to pull together and having a plan or a few tools in your pocket going into a difficult board member, especially as a new superintendent or principal, is going to be really important. Let's have some fun here and go with Mr. Andrew Taylor. I think they had the most votes unless Melissa gives me a different look here. All right, we'll go to
why did you recommend the candidate you chose? Type your response in the space below.
Most votes, even though in a lot of places we can't say votes at the board table because it was in closed session. But we'll say most votes today.
After much discussion, you recommend Mr. Andrew Taylor and state that you believe this has been discussed sufficiently to garner full board support. Taking a moment to look each of them in the eyes, you then ask if they can support your recommendation.
Right, kind of important, right? Might not have 100% agreed, but can you support the recommendation because it's coming from the superintendent?
I believe we've discussed this long enough, so let's go ahead and come back out of closed session. You have an action item to address. Do I hear a motion to end?
I move that we conclude the closed session.
I second that motion. Okay, then we move back into open session.
Great. So we got consensus moving out of closed back into open. The board approves the tentative contract to be offered, negotiated between the superintendent and recommended candidate without the candidate being mentioned at this point. Thank members of the board. They move on to the other agenda items.
How could you, as the superintendent, support the new principal to be successful in the school and in the community?
I think this is really important. I won't bore you with filling this one in, but not only did we walk through, a hiring process there, but whoever you hire, right? There's no perfect candidate. So then the piece is, how are you going to get them off to a good start, right? Not just on the job and the job description duties, but also in the larger community. So this is also a piece where you talk to your team, right? Okay, people are on the hiring team. Okay, board, how are we going to help them find a house if we want them to live in our community? How are we going to make sure their spouse or children are connected to our community and things like that? And then be very intentional about that post-hire. So we would talk through that. I'm going to submit this and just show you at the end.
What did you learn in this simulation that could be applied to an actual hiring scenario to proactively address any issues of bias that board members may have about candidates? Type your response in the space provided below.
So I do want your feedback on this one, and then I'll show you the report that gets produced at the very end here. When you think about just this little mock sim and the hiring processes that you've led with a board or without a board, what types of things can you do to make them more objective and try to minimize bias? Just throw out some ideas here.
it was always the very first question, and the board always asked me, what is this in the best interest of kids? And that I think that has to be the question that's most important.
Focused on students. I agree. What else?
The amount of time or experience that they've had at a specific grade level or position in their past experience as leader.
Sure. Their previous experience is their best predictor of their future behavior, right?
Being in a small district or a rural district, you'd want to know why they would want to be in a smaller rural district. And I would have given them information about our LCAPs and all that and asked them to describe what their next steps would be at the high school.
And to follow on with that, Stuart, do they have rural experience, which would be important in a rural setting?
Yeah, I don't want somebody coming into my school, and I mean, I think all of us are in a little different situation about where our settings are. I'm in a district, or I was in a district of 400 kids, but most of my teachers lived in Bakersfield, which has 25 districts. And so, why do you want to go to a rural district? And what are your future plans? Some of us may be in a place that there is not another town anywhere near us, and they want to be in that town, but I don't want somebody using it as a stepping stone.
Sure. And vetting that, right? Because not just maybe what they say, but really vetting that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'd offer too, really clear hiring criteria up front, right? Figure out what you're after. What skills and experience are we looking for? And then you can say, why do you want to be, then you can ask the detailed questions, but you got to get clear on what you want first. Good. All right. So
despite the underlying bias that initially surfaced.
And here's what happens at the end. You get not this one, this is a little reflection piece, but at the end you get emailed to you. Let me find it here. You get emailed to you a report that has all of your answers on it, and it's aligned to the standards. This is a new thing that they've added. I'll click through this. Maybe the report is at there. I am more aware of differing perspectives. We'll just answer this quick and see if it'll let me move in, because I wanted to just show you the report. Yeah, here we go. Then this is the report it produces. You can download as a PDF. So your choices here, it gives you other choices that you had, time it took for decision. It gives you a little bit of feedback about your choices, kind of the pros and cons, if you will. Same thing here. Here was a choice, other choices, pros and cons. So I actually have my students download that report, turn it in with a reflection. In your context or your setting, these reports may or may not be helpful, but it is important to go back and, if you wanted the report to see why choices were made. So I pushed through that fairly quickly. Sorry that we didn't have a little more think time on some of those, but I wanted you to experience the full sim. And obviously, if you're doing this with your team, you probably would have printed or, had more information. But I hope you see the value to a simulation maybe being a little more safer than the real thing, and the value of preparing your principal team or your students if you're in higher education. I've actually used these in the hiring process as well. We've had superintendents stand and go through a sim in front of the board, and it was telling. That I've started to go away from that a little bit, because you can't get a board to agree on correct answers, let alone have a candidate do that. But there is a lot of value to these practical simulations. Today you just got one, the bias in hiring, and there's a ton others. I wrote another one on a transgender student and how to accommodate them and their family. There's one on a board member's child that trespasses and how do you manage that with a board member. So there's just a plethora of unique simulations that Ken and SchoolSims offer. I will finish with this, and then hopefully we can shut off the Zoom. And if you have any other questions, I will gladly take them. on and off the air. But last two things I would finish with for you guys today is a personal invitation. If you are interested in learning about another AI tool, I'm actually hosting a webinar, so this is timely, on Friday, March 6th at noon. It's via Zoom here, tiny URL there, hosted by my university, my search firm. And this is a tool called Manta AI, where you dump data and information into it, and it's education specific. It will kick you out some pretty nice reports to make district decisions on. So I only threw that in there because, and it's free, by the way. I threw it in there because the AI topic, I thought some of you might want to go further with that topic, and that's Friday. And then lastly, Melissa, you asked for my contact information. So here is my contact information, and I will send this to you by email as well, so you can pass it on to folks if you want to follow up with me beyond today. Great. Again, my challenge to you was one thing that you could take away with AI or with the simulation that might be valuable in recruiting, vetting candidates, writing interview questions, or reducing bias in the hiring. So I hope I delivered, and it was worth your time today. Thank you.
Well, Trent, thank you so much. This is exactly the kind of practical, real-world insights that our world leaders need. It's the kind of conversation that really doesn't happen very often in professional learning spaces across our context. So we're very grateful for your expertise and your time today. Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
And thank you to everyone who joined us today. This is what Lead Where You Are is all about. It's bringing the right people and the right tools together so that rural leaders can do this work with more confidence and less guesswork. We'll be sending out the recording along with the slide deck so that you have an opportunity to review that. And for those of you that joined us, I'll send out the full simulation to work through on your own time. I hope that you'll be able to join us in April for session 2 and in May for session 3. More information will be coming from NREA, so please make sure that you register to join us for both of those sessions. Thanks again for spending time with us today.